your recent article in the Global Times is titled U.S. Policymakers Caught in Hubris-Driven Ignorance Trap Over the Taiwan Question. So there's some overlapping themes here. I mean, with how the U.S. is treating Russia with regard to the U.S.'s approach to Taiwan. Could you maybe just expound on what your argument is there? And yeah, what exactly is the U.S.'s endgame with Taiwan? Because it seems like, I mean, if we're talking about a catastrophic confrontation with Russia, I can't think of anything more catastrophic than a confrontation with China, given its capabilities and where it sits in the world today.
Yeah, I mean, again, fundamentals. There was a time when the United States supported the nationalist Chinese, the Kuomintang, Chiang Kai-shek. And we supported them. And at the end of the Second World War, we actually got them elevated to Security Council status, one of the 5 major powers that were victorious in the conflict. Then a funny thing happened on the way to church. In 1949, the communists overthrew the nationalist Chinese, and Chiang Kai-shek and his Kuomintang, and I'm probably saying that wrong, fled to Taiwan, the island of Formosa off the coast of China, where Mao Zedong and the Communist Party took over China. And the United States, for a while, because we were in a hot conflict with China. Remember Korea, we actually were engaged in actual combat operations against China. And then we had the Cold War with China. So we supported Taiwan through the Cold War. And Taiwan basically believed that it was the legitimate government of all of China, and that they were looking for a time when they could overthrow the Communist Party and reestablish control. That turned out to be a fantasy. And by 1971, the rest of the world finally realized that, no, hey, Taiwan, you got to get out of the Security Council. We're putting the big boys in. The Chinese communists are invited to come in. And that shift took place at the time. Not only was China being elevated on the world stage, but there was some important rifts developing between Communist China and the Soviet Union. Over, China didn't like being dictated to by the Soviets about global communist policy. China wanted to develop its own independent nuclear capability. Russia wasn't helping. There's just, some disagreements. And then there were some border issues where they were, actual fights between Soviet and Chinese troops along the border. And so in 1972, Richard Nixon flew to China and changed history. We established diplomatic relations with China. We began engaging in active trade with China. And in 1979, as a reflection of this, we had to alter our policy because China wasn't going to stand by and let us continue to pretend that Taiwan is the big player. So the United States Congress passed something called the Taiwan Act of 1979. And in it, we embraced two things. One, something called the One China policy. That means that we don't believe in two Chinas. There's not a Taiwan, there's not a China. There's one China policy, and that Taiwan is part of China. We also believed in the peaceful reunification of the two, and that in order to ensure the peaceful reunification, we would assist Taiwan in having enough defense to deter any effort by the Communist Chinese to violently reabsorb Taiwan. So, and this turned into a policy of what's called strategic ambiguity, where we sort of let it hang out there that we would assist the Taiwanese if they were attacked, but we didn't say it right up front because we didn't want to encourage Taiwan declaring independence on the mistaken belief that the United States would be there to help them. Key to this was the notion that we would, that through the economic improvement of economic relations, that China would transform from this autocratic communist centric nation into sort of free market capitalism, democracy. It would be like us. They would, they think like us, dress like us, talk like us. They just wouldn't look like us. But hey, that's the Chinese. No, we don't care. That didn't happen. The Chinese actually retained their, communist nature, and then they did something really embarrassing. They took capitalism and made it work, and on a big scale. They did interesting things like run successive 5-year plans where they pulled 300 million people at a time out of poverty into the middle class status. They actually build infrastructure that works. They have high-speed trains that operate from clean stations efficiently, and basically, China's doing it better than we do it. They've built through something called the Belts and Roads Initiative. They've built trade relationships with the world that have helped bring the Chinese economy into the world's great economic engine, controlling supply chains, access to resources. They've outmaneuvered the United States. Barack Obama tried to, pivot to the Pacific to counter China, and he came up with something called the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and it was supposed to be this wonderful alliance of free trade association of everybody in the Pacific except China. China wasn't invited to play.
No.
Okay, so he bullied everybody, cajoled everybody, got them all on board. Donald Trump came in and looked at it and said, "Nah, I'm out of here." He pulled the plug, and the TPP went away. What did China do? They came in, picked up the pieces, built it all together, and made it even bigger. And now China's part of it, and America's not part of it. This is the sort of thing that's been going on with China outflanking us. And at some point in time in the United States, we realized that China, without firing a shot, has taken over the Pacific. They are the dominant power in the Pacific. And now we need to come up with a strategy that reverses this, that preserves American dominance in the Pacific, because the Pacific has always been an American lake, especially after the end of the Second World War. But we can't do it economically because we just proved that the Chinese beat us hands down every time we go. So what are we going to do to the Chinese? Enter Taiwan. We have now began a process of encouraging the Taiwanese government not to unify with China, leading them to believe that they can be strong enough to repel any Chinese attack because America will be there to help, which means that strategic ambiguity is no longer ambiguous. It means that, and we saw it again with Joe Biden's slip of the tongue. What if China attacks Taiwan? America will come to its defense because that's what we're obligated to do. Well, no, we're not, unless there's a secret annex that we don't know about. There is. Amy Klobuchar, wonderful. No, Tammy Duckworth. I'm sorry. Tammy Duckworth flies in, and she's sponsoring legislation, which, if implemented, would allocate hundreds of millions of dollars to put on Taiwanese soil pre-positioned American military equipment that American troops would fly in and marry up with. I will tell you right now, China will never allow this to happen, because China, we have the 1979 Taiwan Act. China has the 2005 Anti-Secession Act, a law. It's part of their constitution. And it says China wants to peacefully reunite with Taiwan, and we will take as long as possible to do this. But the moment Taiwan acts as if it's independent, or the moment some other nation comes in and treats it as it's independent, then we will immediately implement non-peaceful measures. We're at that stage right now. This is the scary part, and America hasn't woken up to it. The senior diplomat, last name Wang, called Tony Blinken and told him to STFU. I won't say what it means, but I'm pretty sure. But basically, just shut up. Stop talking. Quit saying what you're saying, because it's insane. and we aren't going to tolerate it. You are speaking the language of war. And this isn't theoretical. You know, the Chinese ambassador to the United States in January, I think January 28th, gave an interview with National Public Radio where he said, you know, if the United States continues to behave vis-a-vis Taiwan the way it is, it's probable we will be going to war with the United States over. The Chinese ambassador is saying this to an American media outlet, saying we're going to go to war with you if you continue. That's unprecedented. It's never happened before. He's saying that now. Biden made his slip. Blinken says stupid things. Austin says stupid things because we are literally governed by stupid people, and so their senior national security guy calls Jake Sullivan and tells him the same thing. Shut up. Stop talking. You guys are literally creating the case for war. Wang called Blinken. And now the Chinese defense minister has come out and said, guys, we're going to go to war. We're going to blast you to smithereens. It's going to happen. I don't know. And America's just sitting there going, they don't mean it. They're bluffing. Well, I think the one harsh lesson of Russia's special military operation in Ukraine is that Vladimir Putin don't bluff. And we're about to learn another lesson, that President Xi Jinping don't bluff. China, I believe, maybe even by the end of this year, is going to invade Taiwan. It's going to be an extraordinarily brutal military incursion. It's going to be faster than anything we can possibly imagine. It's going to kill tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of Taiwanese. And if the United States attempts to intercede, we will lose our fleet. And then the question is, what do we do? What happens when an American aircraft carrier with 6,000 Americans goes underwater? Does America just sit back and go, oh, okay? Or do we respond by inflicting similar pain on China? Maybe dropping a nuke on a Chinese port or a Chinese city.
It seems like the only remain, right?
And then what does China do once one of its cities been nuked? They take out Los Angeles, they take out Seattle, and then what do we do once we lose big West Coast city? We take out, and suddenly the world ends. All because we are so stupid about China's national security interests, and we don't understand China. Let me tell you what I think. Again, I'm not going to pretend that I'm a Chinese expert, but I believe right now that if I were put in charge of U.S.-China relations, that I could convene in Macau or some semi-neutral territory a meeting of the Chinese Communist Party and the Taiwanese, and I could come up with a peaceful solution that incorporated Taiwan into China and had Taiwan retain its independent political character and have Taiwan continue to function economically and socially the way it's doing today, so that there'd be zero disruption to the Taiwanese people. It would resolve this problem whatsoever, and more importantly, put the United States at the table with China as a friend. And now we could sit there with the Chinese and say, hey, I know you guys sort of outmaneuvered us on that trade thing, but it's hurting us. We're hurting. And so we need to talk about how we can lessen our pain and how, and that's called diplomacy. And we treat the Chinese as equals. We all go through the same door. We all sit down around the same round table, and we all talk about mutually beneficial arrangements where not one party's not trying to take everything for themselves, where they say, hey, we can make this work for everybody. I could do that today, right now, because the Chinese want to do that. They don't want to go to war over Taiwan. The senior Chinese officials have said that we lose everything if we invade Taiwan. We lose everything. Any advantage we wanted to get, we lost. Our economy will be shattered. Our standing in the world will be shattered. But we have to do that because Taiwan is China, and we can't allow it not to be China. The United States, again, we don't know how to behave as a member of a team. We only understand how to be King Arthur with Excalibur, dictating to the round table how the world should work. We don't know how to be a knight of the round table, sitting around as equals with others, trying to peacefully coexist. And we're going to have to learn that, or we're going to find ourselves involved in the conflict with China that will be far worse than anybody can possibly imagine. I don't give the Russian incursion into Ukraine, I give a 0 chance of going nuclear. 0. A US-Chinese conflict over Taiwan, I give a 70% chance of going nuclear. That means the world ends. I hope people understand that the world will literally end. Go watch, there's a couple movies, but, On the Beach. Go watch On the Beach. You can watch the old classic black and white version or the new modern color version. Either one ends the same. Everybody dies. There will be no survivors. That's just what happens when you have global thermonuclear warfare. And that's the direction we're heading, because the United States is governed by stupid people elected by stupid citizens who don't know anything about the world they live in. I'm sorry. The American people, I love them. I'm one of them. One to die for them. But collectively, we are the most ignorant people in the world about the world we live in. We don't understand this world. Hell, we don't even understand ourselves. I'll leave you with this. My wife is a naturalized U.S. citizen. She had to take a test to become a citizen on the Constitution of the United States. Document that I took an oath up and defend against all enemies, foreign and domestic. I will bet you again, a dime to a dollar, that if we offered that test right now to every single naturally born American citizen who waves the flag and says USA, USA, 90% would fail that test. Now, you know what happens to a non-native born American who fails that test? They don't become a citizen. Imagine if we gave you a test on the Constitution and you failed, and we said, hey, let me take that passport back. You ain't a citizen anymore. Citizenship is, in the United States, it's a gift. It's a gift. It's an honor. It's a privilege. We can't take it away from you. You're given it by being born. But man, you've got to earn it. You got to earn it, and we're not earning it. And as a result, we end up with stupidity like this, what's going on with U.S.-Chinese relationships.